Hi everyone and welcome to the next episode of the HeelanHub podcast, the show for small business owners. I'm Dan Heelan and on today's show I'm excited to talk to you about starting a new business. Now around this time of year I think it's quite exciting. A lot of people come in and think actually new year, new me, let's go get a new business, let's finally start that thing. So I always like to refresh this and talk about this topic now, and that's the fact that, you know, as business accountants we work with, well, at this point in time, over 3,000 small business owners. Many of those have been on that startup journey. They're fresh, they're new businesses, they don't know what they're doing. They come to us for support with, you know, getting the finances in order in terms of those tax returns or the registration for taxes, booting limited companies up, all this kind of stuff. So a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are tips we've gleaned from helping these people do just that. But also as a small business owner myself over the years, multiple things on the go. If I think where I started in my 20s to, you know, the last 18 odd years of being an accountant and running an accountancy business with certain side hustles, a lot of my own experiences poured into these kind of 8 practical points that I want to talk to you about in today's show. So it's going to be all about some real practical tips to get your mind thinking, hopefully some inspiration to think, actually, have I got these things squared off and how can I go and get those sorted? Because if you get these 8 things sorted out, you're going to have a successful business, at least in terms of giving yourself the best percentage chance to get going, because you've probably seen the stats on actually making it to the 5-year point are pretty low. For small businesses in the UK, only about half of them ever make it to the 5-year point. But we find very commonly that a lot of our clients exceed that. And I think it's because they come with the right intentions and take it seriously. I quite often say to people, you know, we work with serious business owners, not serious in terms of turnover, they get there, but serious in terms of attitude. And this is key for me. And I think a lot of these things, if you've got these in place, really demonstrate that you're serious about this working, because it really can be difficult to be in business. But with these tips, I'm sure you're going to have a great time. So let's get into it. So then it's not going to surprise you to know that as a business accountant, I want you to have some sort of plan when you start the business. And I'm not talking about 200-page slide decks that you might have put together with AI. I'm talking about actually just having some basic financial numbers that are known. Things, and you could do this on a bit, it should be simple enough that the business model, as it were, can be done on a piece of paper, or you might look and do it on a spreadsheet. So for example, you might just look, if I sold 10 of these items, how much am I going to price it at? What would I have in? How much is it going to cost to deliver those 10 items, either if it's a product, you know, what's all the costs of getting it? Let's say I'm like a retailer reselling stuff. What can I buy it at? How much is the postage and delivery? How much is the packaging stuff? Like, what do I make per item that I'm going to sell? And have some idea of what that looks like. If you're in a service-based industry, and a lot of you will, so let's say you're a freelance graphic designer and you've just started up in the new year, well, actually, you know, you're guessing at what your price may be. But just have a think, how many hours would I need to work to deliver this if I'm going to price it at this? Do I actually make a profit? And try and put that in and figure out, okay, where does that leave me? What is my business model? Now, you can take that to lots of different degrees in terms of understanding things that are referred to as margins, and they're really, really key. One thing that's always worth figuring out is what's your gross profit margin. Now, I don't want to go too deep in numbers and things in this episode, but being an accountant, I do want to talk to you about that. And that's if you let's just take one service. So say you're a freelance graphic designer. Actually, let's do products because products are easier. Let's say I'm going to sell something for 100 quid. What are the costs of buying that thing in and the packaging? Like we said, let's say it's £70. So actually I make £30 profit after I've paid all my stuffs. So for every £100 I sell, I'm going to make £30, 30% margin. So knowing what that gross profit margin is really going to be important as your business grows. You can do a lot of calculations later on about how that might scale, what that might look like if I sold 10 of those, you know, that kind of stuff. So and keeping and tracking that margin as you grow is going to be really powerful for your business. So understanding it day one is going to be important. So that's kind of your business model. It's like, how many of these things do I need to sell then? So let's say I sell enough of those that I've generated £3,000 in gross profit. So I've bought all the product, I've delivered it, I've shipped it, brilliant. I've got £3,000. What about now if I need to pay for a storage unit, and I need to pay my accountant, and I need to pay my phone bill, and I might need some insurance? All these things, what's often referred to as overheads, where do they sit? What profits at the end of it? And that profit at the end of it is, in theory, what I could pay myself, or some of it. But some of this I'm not going to want to pay myself because I want to reinvest it in stock, or maybe I want to hire a person in advance of the money coming in. There's all these kind of challenges. So planning that out, even if it's a simple 12-month spreadsheet, it's going to be really, really powerful for you, and it's honestly going to have a big impact on your success. So to help you with this, if you go to HeelanAssociates.co.uk/cashflow, all lowercase, you're going to come to a really simple downloadable spreadsheet and it is really simple. You'd be almost embarrassed to have put it up there many years ago, but it's still there. And it shows an opening bank balance and a closing bank balance each month. And you just put what's coming in and what's going out for the various categories. And hopefully the categories alone might give you some inspiration about the type of things you might be thinking about. And you'll be able to see if you've got any money at the end of the month. Now, that's really important. Now, you might also be thinking as you're doing this, how does tax affect that? If you're making a profit, it can be quite difficult if you don't know anything about tax. But just put 25% in your example for now. Just take 25% out in tax and think about, what does that take home cash look like now? How much money could I pay myself? And then you've got to understand how much you could survive on, and how long, most importantly, how long you could survive on that amount of cash. Because that's what we see most often, is that the businesses that fail early are the ones that just fail to factor in the case that it's going to take a lot longer than you think to get customers and to get paid and everything else. It's certainly at the level you might predict. And how long can you run without getting paid, or being paid very minimal amounts? And so often, you've probably seen that internet meme of, two people digging a hole and they're moving sort of left to right. One of them is striking gold, the other one's decided to turn their back just as they had like a millimetre left to dig. And in the small business world, I always think that millimetre is where you've run out of cash and you had to call it a day. You couldn't do it any longer and you were so close. You'd made all the marketing, all the network connections. Your next big deal was just around the corner, but you couldn't survive long enough to see it through. So planning how long that's going to be based on some sort of numbers, and of course it's not going to be accurate, but it's going to be a lot better than not having it. You're just going to have some idea of what that might look like, is really, really important. And only about half of small businesses make it to this 5-year point. So it's really important to try and start off with the best plan. So as I say, it doesn't have to be that deep, but it does have to be something that okay, I can survive 6 months, for example, on what I'm going to put in with no money, and look at your own lifestyle and think, how much am I willing to give up? And I know personally, this is somewhere I've been there many years ago, where I was looking at my overdraft and I couldn't afford a can of Coke. I had to ask my mum to buy me one. So, but I had confidence. I had confidence it was going to work out, and it did work out in the end. But you do get those times where you have to know that you can run lean if you really want to make this work. And so often I think the two don't marry. We see a lot of owners that have got, they're coming from very well paid jobs, used to that money, think that they're going to suddenly start a business and be able to replace their income pretty quick, and it doesn't always work like that. There are outliers where of course it does work, particularly if, let's say, you're in services, you've got this amazing network of people, you get made redundant, say, but those people still need your services. You might literally walk out the door employed one day, you've just maybe been made redundant with a bit of cash, and then the next day you're contracting back to one of your previous clients or something. Those things do happen, but for most people starting small businesses, they don't, and it does take a lot longer. So now with that, you'll also hear this myth that small businesses run at loss for years. It's absolute rubbish. If you run at loss for years, you're in the really small micro business world, you're probably going to run out of money and not be able to trade. Of course, we see these big tech companies that are funded by loads of external finance and funding and equity and all this other funding that they get, venture capitalists, private equity firms, all the rest of it. Of course, they can afford to do that as they develop the product and things like that. But for most micro small businesses, if you're a coffee shop and you lose money for 3 years, you probably won't be there in 3 years' time. So it is a myth, and it's going to be really key for you to generate as much cash as fast as possible and be as profitable as you can on paper early to maintain that. So just think that when you're planning, in the planning stage. And again, I'm going to presume you've done your basic research and that you understand that there is a market for this thing. Obviously, if you're going to start a coffee shop, people want generally to buy coffee. You might not be ready for the realities of running a coffee shop, but at least you know that the market does drink coffee. Sometimes we see things where people really struggle to get that. And that to me is point number 2. So if point number 1 is starting with a plan, making sure you've got some sort of plan sketched out about how the business model will work and how long till you run out of cash. If you can do those couple of things, even if it only takes an hour, just have some idea. Then the second one is to know your offering. So if you forget the coffee shop for a minute, let's say you're in services. So you've decided to be a freelance IT person. I'm going to use IT because this is so common that this occurs. Is that the IT business owner, I meet them at a networking do, and I say, what do you do? They say, I've just started my business. Great, amazing. What is it you do? Well, I'm in agile IT, working in, whatever. I can't even think of some of the terms they'll throw at you. And I'm like, okay, cool. I don't know what it means. Who does it help? How does it help and benefit? What might it cost to work with somebody like you? And a lot of the time, these questions, there's no answer. They'll be like, well, it depends. Well, it depends on what? Do I need £5,000 to work with you? Do I need 50 quid to work with you? I don't know. And I might not be doing business with you. And this is really important in a networking sense. I might not be doing business with you, but the other people that I know, I might think you're the coolest lady I've ever met and you're really memorable. But I could bump into someone in my day job, imagine my job, I bump into a lot of other businesses that need businesses' services, and I don't know what you do or whether you can help them. So AI is a great one for this at the minute. I'm in AI integration, right? What might that look like? How much might it cost? And there's so many people out there that are basically saying, I can do this AI integration, but can't give a case study of where they would make it work. What's the business case? How has it helped somebody? How much might it cost? What kind of things? Because most people at this stage don't know what they need. You have to kind of show them the solution. So it's this kind of stuff, but IT particularly gets a bad rap for this. It's the most common one I've seen. So know what you're selling, how you're roughly going to price it. What budget would someone need to work with you? I don't think bespoke pricing everything you do is going to be that much of a seller in the long term, because you just can't explain quickly enough what you do. Of course, you can have a ballpark. You can say, oh, look, typically people spend X or Y with us, and let's have a chat and nail down what that might look like. Of course, like when we do projects like that all the time, where someone will say, I want to look at all these things, what might that look like? But we know ballpark what they need. Quite often it's like, it will be this. And they'll be like, oh, it's just not worth looking at then. And I'll be like, okay, that. But them knowing that, bit like this AI thing, if it's going to be 40 grand to do and you're a new startup, you're not going to invest 40 grand in it probably if you've got no money. You know, you've just started as a freelance graphic designer and it turns out there's this newfangled thing somebody could do for you. You might just not be able to afford it. So knowing your offer, knowing your pricing, your bundles, your services, how you might package it, that's really important early on so you can explain it to somebody. Of course, explaining those benefits of how it helps people. So again, let's use marketing as an example. Quite often you'll hear somebody say, I'm a freelance marketer, but it's like, that's quite wide. That's like saying I'm a doctor or an accountant to a degree. It's not really clear what you do. So I think being able to explain, you know, I help businesses in this sector do this thing. You know, maybe it's get more followers on Instagram, like very specific outcomes. And even better if you've got testimonials. I know when you start out, sometimes that can be difficult, and that's part of the cool process, I think, of being early on, is trying to get those testimonials and people that you can say, look, I've worked with this and I got this result. Really important for your own product development as well. So knowing your offering is going to be really key, but being able to explain concisely how much it costs, who do you help, and that kind of thing. You're going to be asked to do that repeatedly over your business lifetime, whether it's just at the pub, whether it's for family, whether it's a business networking do. Yeah, you waffling on for 10 minutes and then really coming away not clear about what you do and who you help is a problem, and how much budget they may need to begin working with you is going to be quite big. And then when you've got that, we then need to have a plan about how we're going to get customers. And notice at the minute, I've not talked about any of the practicals about tax, record keeping, anything else. It's not going to surprise you to know it is coming. But at this stage, I just want you to think about, does it work? How much cash do I need? When would I run out of cash? What is it I'm actually doing? Who am I helping? And can I explain it to somebody just so I can start going to go and get sales, or at least marketing and telling people what I do? And then the third one of have a plan of how you'll get the customers, which really is the marketing. So I know it sounds weird because you might think, well, surely I should be thinking about having a plan of getting customers before explaining what I do. But I find if you're crystal clear about what it is you do and what your offering is, this next stage becomes easier because you've got an idea of who your client, I mean, marketers use all sorts of terms, you know, ideal customer profile, your customer avatar, all these types of terms. They just mean like, do you know who you're selling to, what their needs are, and how to talk to them, where they hang out, all that kind of stuff. But having some sort of plan of how you're going to get customers is really important, and also just being realistic about what that might look like. So now this is going to be funny because I'm a guy that runs a business that, you know, generates a very good amount of leads from various internet presences all over the place. So, but my first point here to everybody is always that the internet is not an instant money magnet. Now, of course, sometimes it is. You might have a viral video somewhere that does really well and generates leads for you. But whether that's a sustainable machine, it's going to take a lot more effort, money, investment in both time or money than you think to make it a machine. So for generally, it's not a money-making machine. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of business owners we see will go, well, I'm going to spend £5,000 on my new website, and then I'm going to run some pay-per-click and some Google ads, and it's going to generate leads. And for some businesses that might work, but actually for most people, they don't have the budget to really make that work, at least in the examples we see. I know some SEO specialist is going to come at me because the last time I spoke on SEO, a few people were like, well, actually, and I'm not saying SEO doesn't work, I'm not saying pay-per-click doesn't work, I'm just saying in the scenarios we see where people are starting on really micro budgets, it's not always a good return on investment, or they just can't keep it up for many of these things to work for long enough. So the internet isn't an instant money making machine, but when it works, it really, really does work. Websites take time. Even I think, again, I'm not a website expert, but people telling me who are in this game who are clients of ours, it could take 6 months odd to Google to really start to fill that website and show it to people well and all this kind of stuff. I don't know if that's true in the age of AI, but that was certainly the historic thing that people used to say. I know that networking takes time. I mean, going back probably, 18, 19 years ago, I remember networking all the time, didn't have a website, as in the earlier days of the internet. And everything was done by shaking hands, referral, and all the rest of it, which is why I like the offer piece first, because if you can just go meet people and talk to them, you will get business. It's just a long game. Networking, though, does take time. You have to build relationships. People have to know, trust you, want to do business, and then meet somebody that actually does need your thing. I know it's funny in the accountancy world, some people will have an urgent need because they've got a tax return. But for example, that we know through years of data and everything else, that the average sales cycle for somebody coming across us to wanting us is relatively long on occasion. Just depends where they are. They might not like their current accountant, but know that they've got to keep paying them for the time because they're 9 months through the year. So it takes a bit of time before they want to make a change. In your market, it might be the same. They might be tied into a utilities contract they can't get out of, or some other service provider's contract they can't get out of, and therefore it's going to take a while. So all of that kind of thing takes time, and there's tons of studies showing all the different times that someone would have to see your content and everything else online before they trust you enough or want to reach out. And sometimes it's all about timing and just being there when they do need it. So all these things take time and effort. So having that solid plan of how you're going to get customers is going to be really important. And you might even find that's a skill set you haven't got and you need to develop. You might need to pay for some sales training or some marketing help. And then that goes back to your first plan. Can you actually afford to? If not, what can we learn for free? There's a ton of information on YouTube, of course, that can really give you confidence and skills that you may need. But just make sure you factored in to your plan these kind of things, like how long will it take? And what happens if they don't pay me? As we already said, late payments is a massive problem in the small business world, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. But if somebody doesn't pay you, and it's going to take ages to get them, and it might take you longer than you think to deliver the service to get paid, and all this kind of stuff goes back to your plan and originally. So just make sure that you factored that into your plan. So then, we've talked about plan. We've talked about knowing your offering and understanding it. We've talked about having a plan to go and attract clients in terms of some sort of marketing plan. And then when we've got those things, I think then is the practical time to talk about, okay, we know what we're doing. This business could, we feel pretty good that we could actually start a business here. Decide what you're going to trade as. Simple decision, but can be more complex. And we know this from people that listen and view and read our content, that there's a lot of interest in this, as there should be. And that's deciding what you're going to trade as. Are you going to be, generally, for most people, it's going to come down to two things. You're either going to be a sole trader, maybe a partnership if you've got another partner, or you're going to be a limited company. There are other ways you could trade. You could be charities, community interest companies, these kind of things. I'm going to leave those out because this is a business podcast. Generally, if you're a business, you want to make some profit, you're going to be looking at sole traders, limiteds. Now, we've done tons of content on here, and actually the best place for me to listen to me talk about this in even more detail, if you've got time, is when you get at the gym or wherever you listen to this at the minute, or walking the dog. Go to YouTube and have a look at all the content I've put out there. There's tons of stuff of me talking about, should you be limited? Should you be a sole trader? And in fact, I'm sure, even as I'm saying this, I'm probably going to record a couple of podcasts in the next couple of weeks that will cover that in 2026, because a lot's changing. We've had a budget that's raised dividend tax. We've had successive tweaks to tax rates, and it really is close. Now it's more of a scenario game. Am I in the scenario that it makes sense to be limited, and where am I taking my business, rather than let's do a tax comparison? Because if you do a tax comparison, sole trader versus limited, often you're going to be really surprised and disappointed to learn that sole trader looks better. But the looking better is a trap a lot of the time, depending on what you want to do with the money and what you're actually doing and what you're not doing, how much money you're actually drawing and not drawing. Do you want to pay into a pension? Is there other people involved in the business? So many things. And, we run a business where the vast majority of our clients end up being limited companies as they develop, because of the tax advantages and the structural advantages it gives you. So limited is still a very good thing to do, but I also spend a lot of time, as do my team, discouraging people from being limited companies where they don't need to be. We unfortunately see a lot of horror stories where people have booted up a limited company and done £300 and then realise they've got to file all this stuff that they can't do themselves, particularly as there's a free tool that's ending. But in 2026, early 2026, there's a free tool at the moment that allows you, in theory, to file at Companies House and at HMRC, because you have to do several things with a limited company, that tool is ceasing. So it's going to be a lot more difficult. The chances are you're just going to need to pay an accountant. There's an inherent cost with that. And so booting up a limited company to do nothing with it can be a costly exercise. You've got to want it. Going back to this idea of being a serious business owner, serious by intention, serious by attitude. So decide what you're going to do. Just do your research. That's probably the point I'm going to make on this point 4, because that's several shows in itself, which, as I say, I will be recapping in a few weeks' time. But if you're not wanting to wait around for that, just go to the YouTube channel and you can watch me ramble on about that for hours on end on different videos. So deciding what you're going to trade as, so you've got some sort of structure, because then you can think, okay, well, what have I got to do? Have I got to register for any taxes? If you're a sole trader, keeping it relatively top level. If you start early 2026, so before the 5th of April 26, you've got to the 5th of October 26 to register for a tax return. So you've got a bit of time. Your first tax return is then going to be due on by the 31st of January 2027. So you've got quite a bit of time to sort it out. Weirdly, if you register after the 5th of April 2026, you've got to the 5th of October 27 to register, and your first tax return is not going to be due to the 31st of January 28. So there's a lot of extra time if you end up the other side of the 5th of April 26 starting your business. So it's something to think about. I think we've done shows on the best or worst times to start out a new business, but weirdly, I reckon the last week of March is probably one of the worst times if you just don't want the hassle of doing an extra tax return. So have a look at some of these things. But yeah, know your deadlines, but think about there is a registration deadline for being a sole trader. And then for a limited company, it needs to be in existence for you to trade. So you would have to make the decision to be limited, go and register it, or have a formation agent register it. I'd always recommend a formation agent. Accountants, surprisingly, many of them will do that. Or you can use online companies. There's a lot of pitfalls in that. Again, I'll leave that for another show, but there's certain things you want to get when you're forming a company that makes sense to invest at the beginning. Some form agent agents will do them. You just might not know you need them, for example. So getting somebody that you trust or a firm that you trust to start that limited company is going to be quite powerful, particularly where tax savings are concerned. So always think being able to combine, have I got the right setup for tax and future and structure at the beginning is a really good thing. And if you did want any help with that, go to heelanassociates.co.uk/start my company. And we've got an entire accelerator program which covers not only the setup and the structure and the tax efficiency of it, but the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is your finance system, helping you get a finance system set up. So obviously you know your offering and you've planned the business and you're ready to go. You've decided I'm going to be a limited or I'm not going to be a limited. I'm going to be a sole trader or whatever else I'm going to be. And you can go out and start talking to the public. Okay, so let's say you get your first, you're now incurring expenses. You're now potentially you want to invoice a client from your system. Having some sort of system is going to be really, really important. Now with HMRC looking to make 90+% of interactions digital by 2030, and something you might have heard of the Making Tax Digital program for sole traders, and also Making Tax Digital with VAT that's already in for limited companies and everybody in VAT, means that digital record keeping is where you need to be. So absolutely would recommend some sort of form of digital bookkeeping software, a cloud app, and that cloud application is going to be the best thing you can do. For me and the feedback we receive from clients, Xero is going to be the key one for that. So Xero with an X. There are others, you might have seen the adverts for QuickBooks, Sage, and there's a few others. I mean, I've just done a big piece of research for about 10 of them. And actually, I'd probably recommend about 5 of them. And then there's some outliers. But if I said to you my top 3 would probably be Xero, QuickBooks, Free Agent, those ones. If you're banking with NatWest, Free Agent comes free. It's quite powerful. I know our internal team struggle with some of the features of that. It's just a bit of a pain. Sometimes it's not as flexible. But Xero and QuickBooks, very, very scalable as your business grows. Really good. So, and for us, Xero tends to be the one that clients break the least and have the most time using, in terms of if they want to do that themselves. If you do want a great deal on that, go to heelanassociates.co.uk/Xero, all lowercase. And there's a crazy deal on that as well. And you can pick up a trial and go from there. It's some stupid price like, I'd probably, for most people, you want to use the Grow plan as well as a side note. That's the one that's going to be really scalable for your business. If you had a room full of accountants, they're generally going to point you into that one because it's sort of the one that encapsulates everything you're going to need, scales really well. But being able to have that software means you're going to be able to capture all of your receipts and your expenses straight away. You can hook 90% of UK banks, probably more than that. I haven't come across one recently that somebody hasn't hooked up to the software, and all your transactions come in. You can categorize them and bookkeep them nicely. That makes that really, really speedy. And then you can also set up integrations with things like Stripe or Go Cardless, people that do payment processing. You can invoice from it, so you can literally set up invoicing templates. So the minute your work's done, you can ping it straight to your customer automatically. And then you can also, when the money comes in, you can show it as paid. So you can send up-to-date statements, shows you if it's up to date, it'll show you a click then who owes you what. Super powerful finance system, and it scales really well. Like example, I've got a £16 million turnover business on this, and it's just working perfectly for them, and it can do far more than that. So it really is good, whether you're a micro or whether you're a bigger business. And I would say that for those three that I mentioned, I think Free Agent's arguably the one that doesn't scale as well, but QuickBooks and Xero, really, really good. Don't spend too long on that. I could do an entire show talking about accounting systems, but if you want to start somewhere, that's where I would start, heelanassociates.co.uk/Xero. So once you've got your finance system going, it means that if somebody wants to pay you, they can. And with that, you're going to get yourself a business bank account or a separate bank account, whichever one suits your needs. The banks are going to want you to have a business bank account, but if you can, whether it's a business bank account with little bunny ears or not, I don't care from our point of view. It's just the ease of record keeping that you have a separate account that you can pay things for and that people can pay in, so it doesn't mix with your personal finances. Really important if you decide to go limited. Now, I can't not talk about finance systems without talking about payment terms. So if you're invoicing, so let's use the freelance graphic designer example. You've done some work, you invoice your client. You get to choose when they pay you. Now, obviously that should be clearly communicated at the beginning how that's going to work, but I see so many people and they've given somebody another business 30 days to pay them from the time they've issued their invoice. And you ask, why 30 days? And they say, well, it's just the done thing. It's not the done thing. It's not the done thing. Try and keep that as minimal as you can. If anything, try and get payment up front, or at least some of it up front, because it really does make a massive difference to your cash flow. And when you're small, as we said right at the top of the show, generating cash flow, as much of it as you can up front, is going to be the biggest help for you growing a stable business. Obviously, you've still got to deliver on it, but having that money day one, if you can, it's going to be really, really good. Now, as you get bigger, it becomes far easier. And if you've got supply and demand, this is better, right? Because if you've got supply and demand and someone says no, you're like, well, whatever, that's just what we do business. If you don't want to pay it, the next person's going to pay it. It's not a problem. But when you're starting, sometimes you need a bit more flexibility. And often you might sometimes get dictated to. So if you're a small one-person business operating with like the city council or something, they're probably going to tell you what the payment terms are, and you've got is take it or leave it. Again, supply and demand. So in those cases, you can't do anything. But late payments in the small business world is a massive, massive problem that's been covered for years by people like the Federation of Small Business. Xero have got a political sort of arm of division of the business, I guess, where they're trying to help do that. There's lots of other people involved with late payments. So you allowing more people to pay you, and then letting them pay late, or they will pay you late. It's just inevitable. Not everybody, but some people, a percentage of them. You're just adding longer till you get paid. And for many people, the average small business, when they did this survey maybe 3-4 years ago, maybe even longer now, was £23,000 at any one time that your average small business was owed. It's a lot of money. If you had 23 grand more in your pocket, in your business bank account, you'd feel a lot better about your business. So yeah, just make sure that you get that finance system set up early. So you know what you're trading as and you got your finance system. Then we're on to, I suppose, the more practical experience bits that I want to mention. And I think we did talk about consistency. So consistency and action prove time and time again to be better than small efforts or like massive efforts in a small time frame. So when we're talking about marketing, for example, we tend to see a consistent campaign get better results for clients than I'm going to do this crazy, 2 weeks or 1 month of posting on LinkedIn and hope that I'm going to get some results. And again, there are outliers. Of course, there are. I'm not a marketing expert. I'm just telling you what we see. So, but doing the boring stuff well is important. Same with checking finances. Being on top of those finances, looking at those bank balances, keeping an eye on what your cash flow might be looking like if you're struggling, keeping an eye on who you owe money to and who owes you money. All these boring things are going to make a big impact when it comes to sales, following up with a prospect. So a prospect asks you for a price, you give them a price, you don't then just not ask them again. There are many ways to do this cleverly, but you basically don't want to be in a position where if you imagine you put all this effort, time or money into marketing and having a sales discussion with somebody and then you forget the follow-up. If you see what we see and the power of good follow-up in a business, you'd never not do it again. And even then in a busy business, it can be difficult to do it consistently, but consistency is really, really big. And again, talking to your clients, consistently speaking to your customers, looking for feedback, those kind of things, they all come in. And again, this is far easier said than done. As a busy business owner myself, I know how difficult it can be. You wear a million hats at once. As things start to grow, you think it's always going to be an easier thing. Like, I'll just have more people, but it never is. I don't think there's ever a point where you feel like you've got just random excess people around to do all these things for you. But consistency in action and doing the boring stuff well is going to be important. So getting going and doing that action consistently. And I think that then number 7 that comes in with this is just knowing that whatever you're doing is not going to be perfect, and that's okay. It won't be perfect. Whatever service or product you're launching, it won't be perfect, but just launch it anyway. And when you do launch it, you can just tweak it. It's better to do that than just can all the time be sitting there thinking this thing doesn't work. And again, no one wants to put rubbish out there. Of course, you can damage your reputation, do a lot of other stuff. But some people worry too much about and don't get the learning that putting the product out or putting the service out will give you. And then they worry about the price. The price is never right. I could do an entire show talking about what we've learned from owners and price, but the price won't be right. But what I would say about price is when you're starting out, do not price like you're an hourly paid employee. Just price, do that simple model maths I was talking about at the beginning and work out how much money you might make per item or per service delivery. And then think about all those overheads we were talking about you've got to pay for and the tax consequence and what happens when you want to hire somebody that helps, and price appropriately. Because I guarantee you, particularly for services, 95% plus of you are going to be too cheap. And you just don't even know you're too cheap. You just don't feel confident asking for more money. As a business, we deliver a lot of training courses around the south of England, helping startups. And a lot of the things I'm talking about are delivered in these sessions. And when I ask people about their pricing, it is repeatable and consistent as you like, that they will be far too cheap and they won't know they're far too cheap. And then I'll explain to them a few things. They're like, oh yeah, no, you are right. So just think about that you're a bit bigger than you are. That might be I think that's the frame to think about is, what if I was slightly bigger, what would I do? And do that. Because if you think about it, particularly for a service-based business, you're probably able to provide a very bespoke, very responsive service that perhaps a bigger business couldn't, yet you're probably charging far less than somebody who's getting far less than a bigger business who may be arguably providing less of a service. So it doesn't always work out like that, but that can often be the case. And just know, whatever you launch, product or not, there's going to be problems, and it's fine. As long as you've got the mindset of I'm going to fix it, I'm going to come back to it, and I'm going to develop, I'm going to learn the feedback, I'm going to tweak, I'm going to relaunch it, be completely fine. You do see people that do these things where they launch some online course, it fails, they get bad feedback, and then they go and do it again. Like, I'm not talking about continually just putting rubbish out. I'm talking about long-term, trying to build a business that actually makes a difference to people in their lives, whether that's through product or service, and consistently making a better product is really cool. And it's far better to learn on your feet and take the punches if it goes wrong than never launching it. So knowing it's not perfect and going there and just rebuilding it. I often think of it a bit like Lego. I always enjoyed Lego when I was younger, even as an adult. But you have this thing where sometimes you look at something you made and you're like, oh, it's a bit wobbly. Say you did it from scratch. When you're a kid, you might have if you ever built Lego, you might have built it from scratch, maybe not built it properly. It's a bit wobbly. You're like, well, my foundations of my business in this case are a bit wobbly. Let's break those down, rebuild it. It takes time, but you're going to rebuild it and it could be stronger as a result. Sometimes you might not just like the overall look of it, so you might tweak it and break some bits off the edge, put some more bits back on it. Or you think, actually, this is completely rubbish. I'm going to demolish it and start again. That can also be a thing. So just know that it's not going to be perfect. And with that, therefore, and this is the final point, is that it can be hard work. So get prepared for the strain. I think it's the one thing that nobody can prepare you for is probably how hard it's going to be, how much you're going to get beaten up, how lonely it can be at times. And it's really important to find support groups, whether that's other owners, because you will have a lot of people who are not business owners that don't understand. You only have to look at social media comments to realize how massively different people's views are, particularly when it comes to money and things around money. And of course, business is quite heavily entrenched in that zone. And you moaning about something to somebody who just doesn't understand, I don't know, it's a weird thing to explain, but you'll get to know this. So I think finding support groups, whether that's online, whether that's through networking, it's one of the powers of networking. I think a lot of people look at it and say networking is a waste of your time, and sometimes it can be. There certainly can be a time where if your other avenues of getting business mean that you don't need to be at a networking do for 3 hours every week, then you might make a decision not to. Doesn't mean it's not powerful and that you don't make some real lifelong friends. I've certainly made some lifelong business connection friends, I would class them as, over the time through networking in the years, even though I don't do too much in-person networking these days, to find clients personally, but in the early stage of the business, that was a massive thing, and it can be really cool to find those people. The other thing you can do that's quite powerful when you're finding those is if they've got good businesses and they're genuinely good people, you'll want to refer to them as well, and you can create this whole ecosystem of other businesses that can help support your customers or your clients. So really, really cool. But yeah, just be ready for how tough it can be. And there's plenty of reels and things. You can go on Instagram and find all these motivational reels and they're telling you how tough it is, but nothing can really prepare you, I think, for the reality of it and what it does to your life. And the fact that you can never really switch off. You can, of course, you can turn your emails off and stuff like that, but unless you're going to be a pure lifestyle one-person business, you're going to have bills to pay. You're going to have other people to pay. It's going to be one of those things. So that's really my final thoughts on that. I could give you an entire show. In fact, I have penciled a show. I know there was one I did a few years ago, 10 lessons that I've personally learned that a lot of you listened to. As one of the most successful episodes we did, actually. And I feel like updating that as my birthday's just appeared. People will do that thing, don't they, where they take their age and they're like, I'm going to list this many points of things I've learned. I'm not going to go and list that many points, but I think it might make it interesting sense for people that are starting their journey now to reflect back on what I've learned, not only from working from people, but my own pain and gain. So real quick recap then on these points. Start with a plan, get some pen on paper or some spreadsheet onto an Excel spreadsheet, particularly work out how much cash you can afford not to have and for how long. That's going to be big. Know your offering. Can you explain it to me in almost like an elevator pitch? Who do you help? How much does it cost roughly? What kind of budget would I need to work with you? What type of people do you help? What might they say? So if I'm out and about in public, what's somebody going to say where they might need my help? So, for us, it's very much if they're moaning about that they can't get hold of their accountant or they're paying too much tax or they don't know what they can do with their bookkeeping, like they're all people that we would help. And, it's that kind of thing. Like what would people say? And then you can explain and be able to explain that. And with all that in mind, you can then go and try and get yourself a plan for marketing, knowing that it's going to take time. Hit it on several fronts if you've got the time. So as we said, internet, networking, sales, all those more direct sales things are going to work. It's just up to you to pick one and play around with it, see what works in your sector. And then once you've kind of got that initial plan of, okay, I know roughly what the business is about and how I'm going to get people to buy this stuff, let's get the practical things started ASAP. What am I going to trade as? Limited, not limited. Get your finance system sorted, get your bank account and your payment system. How do people pay me? Can they pay me? Can I invoice somebody? Can I capture all my receipts? So at least I'm on a good pegging for my tax originally. And then let's go. Let's get some consistent action, hit the ground running, go and deliver this business, learn on our feet, know that it's not going to be perfect and that it's going to be a very, very hard time at points. So that is it. That's some thoughts to help you get rolling with your business in 2026. So as we've said, practically, it doesn't actually, the UK, one of the things, I know we moaned about tax rates and things like that, but the UK, getting a small business going is actually quite easy in terms of practical things to get in place. We've mentioned most of them here. So it really is quite straightforward. Now, I've not covered stuff in this show because I'm doing a generic tips one, but you might have questions around, should I be VAT registered? How does that work? How does pensions work? How does my pay work in a limited company? Of course, but we've got loads of podcasts on that. So you can go deep dive on those, but that's just some generic tips to get you going when you're thinking about starting this new business in 2026. Or maybe you've started at the back end of 25 and haven't taken it very seriously. And again, serious in terms of attitude. Now, hopefully this will give you some inspiration about what you could do to really sort of go up a gear. But hopefully you found value in today's show. If you have, you can check us out. And if you've got any questions, let us know on YouTube when this episode goes live. We've got a second YouTube channel. So our main one is at Heelan Associates. Loads of subscribers, loads of content and videos on there. In fact, I think we've just delisted 130 old videos on there, but there's still 350 probably plus videos that we've done on there all around all these type of topics. So if you want to know something, that's the one to go to. But we do also have a HeelanHub YouTube channel where we just lob these. You can see me talk direct to camera, but the cool thing about that is the comments. You can come in and interact with, and I do read them all, and I normally get back to you. So if you've got any questions on this, let us know if you found value from the show and go from there. If you have enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe via your favorite app so that you get notified when they come out. Normally we try and release them early in the week on a roughly weekly or bi-weekly basis. But if you can go in there and subscribe, that helps. And if you can, some of them have a review option. I know a lot of you listen to this on Spotify, if you could just drop us a review if you get 2 minutes and just let us know your thoughts. That'd be really, really great. For more business insight and tax tips, be sure to connect with me and my great team on all the social media channels, including, of course, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. That's proving relatively popular when we can do the videos. You can sign up to our 2-weekly HeelanHub Herald, which contains even more business insight and tax tips. That's an email direct to your inbox. Just go on our website at HeelanAssociates.co.uk, scroll around for a minute, you'll get a pop-up box. And of course, I did mention it in the show, but if you do want to get started on this digital record keeping journey, Xero is my go-to, HeelanAssociates.co.uk/Xero. Great deal for you. Small benefit to us if you sign up through that link. It really helps support the show and what we do. And if you do want to get in touch directly about the podcast in any sense, you can also just email us at info@HeelanAssociates.co.uk. Well, that's it. Have a profitable and tax efficient week, and I'll see you in the next one.